Yeah, I mean, I would have loved to see this matchup with Zion Williamson available because he was, and I talked about this last week with Sirat, I believe, or maybe I know Cap Room, who knows? I talk a lot. But I saw it where he's basically their only vehicle for break down the defense, collapse it, and then create. Like you mentioned the difficulty that Brandon Ingram had. Like I think he's going to be seeing Lou Dort in his nightmares. The NBA tracking has it as 11 for 33 shooting over the course of the series, only drew 2 shooting fouls on Dort, 28 points in more than 35 minutes of them lined up together, as many turnovers as assists. And I think that probably might even undercount the impact that Dort had on that matchup. And then in the absence of Ingram not being able to get off and create for other people, CJ McCollum not able to do the same. I mean, we saw obviously in the late game situation, Case and Wallace putting the clamps on him. There's just wave after wave of these defensive options. The only physical mismatch that New Orleans was going to be able to bring to bear was Zion. Story winds up, unfortunately, I mean, we've arrived at the point differently than we had in years past, but we are at the same point of, man, if only they had Zion when it got, in the biggest games that mattered, would have loved to see that. And then they have got to figure out sort of how they build the team moving forward. It's a really difficult set of circumstances because I think everybody looks at the structure of it and says, the best version of this is Zion flanked with shooters as opposed to Brandon Ingram flanked with shooters, or because we saw Brandon Ingram in that matchup get smoked in the series. But also you're going to try to trade Brandon Ingram now with his value. I would have to imagine that like it's absolute nadir, like how they move forward, because they've still got some of, they're still plus picks going back to the Anthony Davis and Drew Holiday deals. They've got young players. They've got options here. I don't know if they can just necessarily run it back with this group. They've got some moves to make, but where they go and how you build out when you're still uncertain about how much you can rely on Zion late in the season, that's a tricky spot to be in.
I think they're definitely in a tricky spot right now. And the way things have gone for the Pelicans, that they need to make changes because the past 3 seasons, they've ended up in the play-in tournament. 2 times they got out of the play-in and then they lost in the first round. All of it without Zion. So it feels like Groundhog Day. Same thing. Something's going to change. I kind of think that was probably Brandon Ingram's last game as the Pelican, just because the fit doesn't seem perfect with Zion. He can be pretty good with Zion. He can definitely be good when Zion is out, though he wasn't against Dort. You just want somebody who's going to be reliably on the court and able to show up in big moments. I don't know if maybe the Atlanta Hawks are a trade destination for him because they've got duplication with Trey Young and DeJounte Murray. I think Murray could be solid for the Pelicans, but they do have all these picks coming in the future. They do have young players who are talented. They just seem to me a little slow in this series against the Thunder. So I think they need to up their athleticism, and I think they just need to mix it up a little bit because it feels like they've been running back the same team for a few years, hoping to hit the perfect mix where everybody's actually healthy. Everybody is able to play together and build that chemistry. And that just hasn't been the case these past 3 seasons.
And to put a pin in that, like the thing that I was most interested in about the Pelicans heading into the season, I'd written about them as one of my most interesting teams before the start of training camp, or before the opening of the season rather, was just like, we hadn't gotten, because of the health issues with Zion, because of sort of staggered injuries for their main guys, we hadn't gotten a consistent look at what it was like when Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and CJ McCollum all got on the floor together for an extended period of time. We got it this season, and it wasn't that impressive, right? It just wasn't. You got the sense that this is never going to be a whole greater than the sum of its parts. They played 737 minutes together this season, which is, I think, maybe like 5 or 6 times as much as they had previous to this season over the first couple of years of them together. And they got outscored by 25 points in those 737 minutes. It just wasn't. It wasn't clicking and not clicking and operating in the way that they wanted it to. You've got Trey Murphy there. You've got Herb Jones there. You've got, if you want to see what Dyson Daniels looks like in a bigger role, there's more players there that sort of need room to grow, and maybe a more harmonious kind of lineups that they can kind of get to. Whether Willie Green will be the guy to get them there, I think that's an interesting question. Depending on who you talk to. You mentioned Pelicans or Lakers Twitter. Pelicans Twitter is a pretty frothy spot too when it comes to whether Willie Green is making the most out of what he's got or, could be doing more with it. We'll see where David Griffin lands on that question moving forward. But, they've got the Jonas Valanciunas question. Jose Alvarado and Najee Marshall are like important bench guys that are going to be hitting free agency too. Remains to be seen sort of where they go. I think, and then the thing with the Pelicans too, or sorry, with the Thunder rather, interesting thing from them is like they now get an extended period of time because that's a 2-2 series with the Clippers and the Mavericks, and that's like a knockdown drag out. I don't have a whole big thought about rest versus rust, but you do wonder, like, for a young team, like, you do wonder if they kind of just want to get back going. Like, we got the jitters out of the way in the first one, and we've been cooking. Like, kind of, would they rather just go and get right into something quick?
Yeah, maybe they would, because I think at the very least, they're going to look rusty whenever the next series finally comes around. That could easily go 7 games, Clippers versus Mavericks, but both the Clippers and the Mavericks are better teams than New Orleans, and obviously much more experienced teams than New Orleans. So the series is going to be a lot harder for Oklahoma City regardless. So first quarter, I'm imagining it's going to be a little bit of a rude awakening. Oh, we're playing a real contending team here who are grown-ups, who are vets, who have played together in playoff games versus a Pelicans team that was happy to get out of the play-in, but obviously undermanned with Zion missing time. In general, though, I think you want the rest. Not let the Thunder are all that banged up, but it gives Shea's ankle a chance to get 100% before they go into a big-time series.
And, the any extended period of time gives Mark Daigneault, our newly minted coach of the year, more of an opportunity to dig into the matchups, get into the lab a little bit. We know he's going to take a closer look at the potential opportunity or opposition, because he takes closer looks at everything. My guy's squinting constantly. So we're pretty good sense of what's going to come for him.